Welcome to Paranormal M, where eerie mysteries unfold. Subscribe and enable notifications to catch our latest chilling episodes. Get ready to be captivated by the strange and supernatural. My personal, scariest unexplained encounter. So, when I was around 12 years old or so, my best friend and I at the time were super into all things paranormal. We would purposely seek out situations that would expose us to ghosts and entities, etc. And I firmly believe if you go looking hard enough, you begin to open the door to these occurrences. We often had our parents take us to Savannah, Georgia, known for being a particularly haunted city due to its history. To stay in the same hotel room a woman killed herself in hopes of seeing her. Ghost tours, you name it. Now, unfortunately for us, most of the time we never experienced anything. However, the scariest experience I had was, well, at least with her. It's always come back to my mind over the years. I always try and rationalize it, but to this day I haven't been able to come up with a good explanation. I'm wondering if you can all help. We're from a small town in Georgia, Edgeville. Or Milledgeville, notorious for its old, now mostly abandoned insane asylum, the Central State Hospital. It has a cemetery with many paranormal sightings and an extensive history. It's called Memory Hill. It was the night before Halloween and we decided to be reckless, go to the cemetery and do all the things that you're not supposed to do. There's a wrought iron fence surrounding a plot of graves there. The fence looked like it had a little devilish face in it, believed to have been placed to ward off evil spirits. On All Hallows Eve, it's said that you can hear wailing and screeching coming from this area of the cemetery. The tale goes that you're not to touch the fence on All Hallows Eve, as to not release the evil. So of course we decided to touch it. There's a witch's grave from a woman named Dixie Haygood, lived 1861 to 1915. Legend goes if you're not casting a shadow on her grave, or you'll bear the full weight of her curse. She's believed to cast this before she died, so naturally we did just that. There's a mausoleum there from William Fish, who had his wife and daughter taken by the typhoid epidemic in 1872. After he constructed the mausoleum, he himself entered inside, closed the door, and shot himself to be with them. Legend has it if you knock on the door, you may hear a knock and reply. We knocked, no reply. When we were leaving, we noticed a friendly black cat in the cemetery. She was very sweet, came up to us purring and rubbing her legs, and followed us for a while. Her mom, our ride, they're an avid animal lover. We all agreed to take her in and bring her to the local no-kill shelter for the next day. She seemed really like somebody's house cat. We'd never seen her before and went pretty fairly frequently. In hindsight, this was not a good idea. This cat likely has always lived there and was perfectly happy. But we took the black cat with us from the cemetery that day. We named her Siren. Now, fast forward to nighttime. My friend has a clubhouse located fairly far in her backyard out next to the woods. She has a fenced-in backyard with a pool. You have to exit the fence to walk out to the clubhouse. We decided to sleep there to add to the scary vibes. We decided to keep Siren in the clubhouse that night with us. At the time, the door in the clubhouse was broken, wouldn't close all the way or lock. We stayed up for a while talking, maybe until 1 or 2 a.m. I have no idea since we didn't have cell phones at the time. Siren begins going absolutely fucking bonkers, hissing and growling constantly and wouldn't let you near her. Now, I'm sure it's because we uproot this poor thing and put her in the small, unfamiliar room with unfamiliar people. My friend and I are chatting, and I hear a loud knock on the floor, like from underneath the clubhouse. The clubhouse is lifted on a few cement blocks, so there's definitely room for somebody to crawl under. I ignore it, thinking that it could be anything. Then I hear it maybe 1 to 2 more times. Also ignoring it, then there's a loud knock that comes from directly underneath where my friend's sitting on the floor. She jumps, and I tell her I've heard a few knocks before, but didn't know what to say, or didn't really want to say anything. She said that she had heard them too, and also was trying to pretend that she hadn't. But this one you couldn't ignore. The knocking starts more frequently, seemingly from multiple locations underneath us at the same time. Then we hear a knock on one wall of the clubhouse as well. The knocking picks up and it's very loud. Eventually it spread to all 4 walls of the clubhouse and underneath us, surrounding us. All at the same time, I'm in tears at this point because I'm so scared. I wanted to run out and make a break for it to her house. My friend adamantly didn't want to do that because she was afraid to leave. The knocking and banging continues for quite some time, on all 4 walls and underneath us simultaneously. We tried to convince ourselves it was just her dad playing a trick on us. We couldn't explain how it would be coming from all sides and below the clubhouse at once. She eventually convinces me it was probably her cats. So I eventually am able to fall asleep. The knocking continued the entire time though. The next morning, the knocking had stopped. My friend later tells me that she didn't think it could be her cats, but was trying to calm me down at the time. To this day, we have no idea what could have caused the knocking. It was very loud and intense at times, shaking the clubhouse. I'm hoping somebody may have a logical explanation, or was it truly some demonic or unfriendly entities warning us to not be dumb kids on Hallows Eve? As for Siren, we took her back to the cemetery the next day, or released the poor thing back to her home. A world of happiness. I had woken from a lucid dream. I had it a little while back. And that, to this very day, the mere thought of haunts me. I've woken up in a world, and this world wasn't scary, or at least not in a typical sense. You see, this world had no negative everything. It was bright and joyful and happy. But that's really about all it was, nothing else. Felt like something from a fairy tale or one of the creepy old merry-go-rounds you see in old theme parks. Nothing was sad or angry, and even just had an ounce of negativity to it. While I roamed this place, I was very quickly realizing that nothing at all in this place seemed to be real or look unhappy. Everything wore a huge grin. Everything. From the buildings to the trees. Hell, when I stared at the sun, I could see a large grinning face smiling back. All these smiling faces looking at me. None said a word. None spoke, just smiled. And I tried looking for, like, any people, and I eventually found someone. I asked them about the place. They turned to me almost like a robot, also wearing that uncanny-looking grin on its face. I guess I'd call it it. It stared at me for around 10 minutes saying nothing, then turned away and continued walking in the same rigid movements a Disney animatronic would. All while this went on, a song played. It was a song I listened to recently, which I found ironic as it also fit the weird uncanny feeling of this place. The song never stopped. Once it ended, it would loop again and again and again. I started to go insane. The bright colors, the smiling faces on everything that existed. The almost childlike music playing in the background. I almost couldn't take it. No negativity, no sadness. All joy, all smiles, all happiness. A world of happiness. Forever. Makes me tired. The time I proved to myself that ghosts are real. It was the spring of 2008. I had just started a job at a fancy resort in upstate New York. I was assigned to work in the kitchen of the golf course restaurant, which was a few miles from the main hotel and resort. The restaurant was a small cottage that had a restaurant, and a small locker room for golfers and both sexes to use. The first encounter that made me think something was up was the old cottage. It was in late April. The golf course was not yet open, as some snow still lay on the links. Only my boss, the head chef, and I were on the property prepping for a private party that was being hosted at the golf club. The kitchen was small and consisted of a small line with stoves, ovens, broilers, and a ticket window. This then led up to a small dishwashing area that finally led to a small prep area that sported a screen door to the inside. I was in the prep area processing some vegetables for the evening service. It was a sunny, warm, late April afternoon. I had the screen door open to the outside, and all of a sudden I heard the giggling of a child, which sounded like something was coming from outside the screen door. The laughter got louder and louder, till I finally checked out the door to find no one. The still closed golf course was empty. Soon after this, my boss came to check on my progress. I told him the story and asked if he had seen some children playing outside the club. He said no, then told me a story that chilled me. He had worked at those golf clubs for a few seasons now. Told me the club was haunted by a little boy. He said he moves stuff and plays tricks on people. I was instantly intrigued. I went out and bought a $20 digital voice recorder from Target. This was 2008 and phones were not what they were today, or are. The cheap device was my plan to see if the story was true. I set the recorder up in the creepiest part of the cottage. The woman's locker, where several waitstaff reported hearing voices and seeing things. I set the recorder up before I left for the night in the locker room and went home. The next day I came back to work and I ran back to grab my recorder. I spent that whole day listening at work, but I was really too busy to really listen. When I got back home, I threw on some headphones and listened as close as I could. At one point, I captured the waitress at the end of their shift talking. They were there grabbing the purses and discussing tips, and that's when I heard it. While they chatted, I could hear a voice whisper, "Out now!" The girls never acknowledge the voice. They keep talking as the voice sounds like a low whisper speaking. I was blown away. A $20 recorder, and the joke is I was trying to disprove was seeming more real by the second. Determined to get to the bottom of this, I ran into work the next day, the recorder in hand. I went up to the woman's locker room located at the top floor and in the back of the cottage. I was alone, 6:30 a.m., the first time to arrive. I took out my $20 recorder from Target. I started to ask questions. What is your name? Why are you here? Pausing for a minute or two between. Silence. I hear nothing. After 10 seconds or so, I take my recorder out of my car and hook it up to my large car speakers. This is when I knew once and for all ghosts are very real. So real, I well up with tears just writing this for you all. After I ask, what is your name, I hear clear as day, Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. But this was not a living person. It sounded as if I was making a movie, like how a creepy ghost boy would sound in a horror movie. But this was real. This was some dumb kid playing around with his, work with a $20 recorder thinking his boss was pulling his leg. I let dozens and dozens of people hear this tape, scaring friends and family for years with this tape. And eventually the recorder was lost and I didn't have to share it with you today, but again, I'm not a ghost hunter. I'm not selling anything. I'm a guy on the internet telling a story. Hey, me too. Since that day, I have believed in ghosts. Could there be something following me? If there is, well, if there is, what can I do or what kind of therapist to go to, LOL, because it's scaring my boyfriend. Or scarring. I know it sounds silly and I don't mind being called crazy, but hear me out. It all started when I was 2 or 3 and I had an imaginary friend, which wasn't, it would literally break things and play with me. Something my mom still doesn't like talking about. Second time is when my grandma passed away in around 2005. I was like 8 or 9 years old when paranormal things started to happen. I would wake up at around 2 or 3 a.m. and I would see her. Thought maybe it was just my grief. Mirrors would fall. Things would move after her death. It stopped when we moved houses a couple of months later. Everything was fine after that. Maybe when I was 12, I got really into the occult and just the dark things. It was just something that made me love it so much, and I still do. After I opened my curiosity with the occult, I started experiencing some kind of visit. Maybe I was crazy or going through some trauma, but there was this dark figure. It always stands in front of the door, always follows me. It always felt like it was watching me. But I felt safe. It never bothered me till now. Well, now I'm 26. Hasn't stopped, but I've been experiencing more of it now. Especially now that I'm in a relationship. We could be in bed sleeping, and all of a sudden I wake up because I feel this presence watching me. It's always in front of the door. My boyfriend and I just moved in together, and last night was pretty scary. We were having sex, and all of a sudden we both felt somebody in the room. We ignored it because, well, wasn't going to let that stop us. The energy switched, though. It felt like an anger in the room. Room went cold. A little bit uncomfortable, to be honest. Something we both noticed. We fell asleep, and during the night I wake up more scared because this time it was on my side and it felt so angry. I know that we heard things at night, and in the morning my boyfriend started telling me how things were falling upstairs and there was no footsteps in the room that's on top of ours. He later explains how he had a weird dream about something that was in the closet in the same room that he heard all these things last night, and that it wouldn't leave him alone because he had something to belong to this thing. So, now he's scared and I'm just trying to figure it out. Any ideas? My dad came to see me in my dreams. In November, my dad had a hemorrhagic stroke and it was pretty severe. He was awake for the first few days, then it was constant up and downs. On Thanksgiving, I got a call from the hospital that he had another stroke on the other side of his brain. We needed to talk about end-of-life care. I had the first dream that night. We were sitting on his back porch at the table, and I was a sobbing mess. I kept saying that I couldn't believe he was going to leave me, and he kept laughing and making a joke out of it. He said, "What are you going to do about it?" I told him I was going to climb in the casket with him. He laughed and reminded me that he wasn't going in a casket. He was going to be cremated. He passed 3 days later. The second dream was a day or two after, and I don't remember much except I was crying again and saying how much I missed him. I don't think he was hugging me back in this one, but I do remember him saying sorry and that I'll be okay. The third and final dream I had was very similar to the second one. I was ugly crying and hugging him and saying that I missed him and I can't believe he left me. And this time he hugged me back. I could really feel it. It was such a good hug. It was so calming and made me feel so loved, and I stopped crying in my dream and just felt okay for the first time in weeks. I haven't had a dream like that since, and I still dream about him, but it's so different from these 3 dreams. There's no feeling of sadness or talks of his death. Just normal dream shenanigans. I know it's possible that it was just my brain trying to help cope with the loss, but to me it felt like he was checking in with me, to see how I was and to say goodbye. I miss him so much. Every night I look forward to drifting off into dreamland in hopes of another hug from him. I had 2 ghost friends as a child. When I was in middle school, my brother, mother, and I went to dinner one night. We were a military family, so we were just recounting and discussing all the places that we've lived so far, and the people that we've met along the way. I brought up the very first house I ever lived in, and the 2 friends I had there. My mom had this strange look on her face, and I asked her what was wrong. She asked me to tell her what these kids looked like. Well, they were twins, or at least a very similar age. The girl wore a sort of bonnet with a little dress, and I don't remember the shoes. The boy wore overalls and a little shirt. They didn't look the same as me. My mother, who is very much a believer in the paranormal, said that those children I remembered were actually ghosts. I was shocked to say the least. I had remembered spending many days with these 2 kids. Told my mom how they used to tell me bedtime stories, and I remembered exactly what my room looked like at the time. I remember the furniture I had and the position of my crib and how the light from the hallway would shine into my room and where the door was in relation to it. I remember because these 2 kids would sit where the light came in and talk to me until I fell asleep. Every night. My mom told me about how I'd play with them, or how when she would give me a bath I would look over her shoulder and wave to them. She said that she had no fear of them, as she was really getting nothing evil there happening. She noticed that I stopped talking about them, or to them, or anything having to do with it. She asked me one day what happened. I apparently told her that their mother had finally come and found them, and they all left together, and I never saw them again. I remember the way they looked, although I've never really been able to find any information on them. The house we lived in at the time was military housing in Fort Bragg. The land was older, and they looked like TV static, but with depth. I remember explaining to my family when I was about 5, they looked like the colors you see when you rub your eyes too hard or for too long. Oh, I know what you mean. I've lived in 14 homes, and this house was the most hateful haunting. We were a military family who moved quite often. Of all the 14 homes I've lived in, this house was the most intense haunting I've ever experienced. From the moment we stepped foot in that house, I could feel an insane heavy weight and darkness there. There were a few bizarre things about this house. Like, for one, somebody was watching me. I felt as if I was being stalked in this house every moment of every day. I could remember how uneasy I felt. The 2 rooms I despised the most were my parents' bedroom and bathroom, and my own bedroom. At the time, I was around 10 or 11 years old. My brother was maybe 15 or 16. We had chores as normal kids do. One of those had to do with cleaning parts of every bathroom in the house, including my parents'. My brother and I both refused to go into my parents' bathroom. I have no idea how to describe this feeling. There were so many mirrors in the bathroom. Felt like somebody was standing right behind you at all times in here. At 26, the thought of this room gives me chills. My mother, didn't question our concern and never forced us to be in there, thank God. My bedroom was the worst for me. I didn't spend much time in here as I felt the most seen in this room, and the dread I felt was immense. I would go to sleep every night hiding underneath the covers. That was because it made me feel better, but because I knew someone or something was watching me. I would hear whispers in this room, and my door would sway some nights. I felt as though my bed was a table that people were congregating around, as the whispers were different people in different spaces around me. I could never make out what they were saying, really, but to be honest, I didn't try to hear them. I ignored them every night. I was lucky enough to have a box TV in my room, and it sat on my tall dresser. One day I'm in my room watching TV, laying in front of the dresser, and I get this image in my head of the whole thing toppling over me, killing me. I disregard the idea as the dresser is real wood, extremely heavy with the added TV on the top. The dresser handles start to move and the dresser sways a bit by itself. I get up and never laid in front of it again. My brother and I would hear footsteps throughout the night. A few times we thought it must be a break-in, but it never was. Never physically saw anything in this house, but I've never had a more fearful, intense, and horrible feeling living somewhere. A soldier entity protected my family while my dad was deployed. We had recently been stationed at Texas, and this was a brand new house. We were the first family to live here. Some of the encounters from this particular ghost come from my brother and mother. This ghost was harmless, but very present. We had had a dog at the time, and she never growled, never bit anyone, and was the most gentle dog I'd met to this day. She was very much my brother's dog, but she watched over everyone in her family. One night, she's in my brother's room with him. She gets up and starts barking and growling where his doorframe is. All the hair on her back was standing up, and we've never seen her do this. A switch happens, and then she starts wagging her tail and lowering her guard, acting as if it was somebody that she knew was greeting her. Our dog was not shy to strangers either. She greeted everybody as if they were her best friend. And after that, she hopped back on his bed and went back to sleep. We would hear footsteps outside her home, as if somebody was on watch, walking around the perimeter of our house. My brother once saw a man standing in her backyard from the window. He calls to my mom, and they bolt outside to confront the intruder. The man was gone. My brother said that he looked like he was wearing some sort of uniform or chef's outfit. My dad was back from deployment at this point. My parents were asleep in their room. My dad, or rather, scratch that, my mom wakes up. In a daze, turns over to look at my father. That's when she sees a boot. She looks up and sees a man in a military uniform standing on the bed, 1 foot on either side of my dad's head looking down at him. My mother goes back to sleep. I do not understand to this day how she fell back asleep, but me neither. But she says that she was not fully awake and it didn't frighten her at the time. But when she woke up in the morning, she remembered what she saw. Another day, my mom was clearing out her closet and reorganizing. Just sort of, looking for things to donate. There are books on military issues that list the soldiers who passed away, including their picture. At this point, we had quite a few of these. My mom kept them in her closet. She had them on her dresser while cleaning, and when she left, she came back. One of the books on the stacks was placed on the floor, turned to what seemed like a specific page. My mother thinks this soldier ghost who watched over us was trying to show her who he was. We were never frightened by this presence, and in fact, I remember it fondly as the ghost who protected us. Weird shit in girlfriend's house. This happened not even an hour ago. My heart's still racing. My girlfriend is asleep, and like most nights, I got up to use the bathroom. While washing my hands, I heard her call my name from down the hall. At first, I thought she'd woken up wondering where I was. She's a light sleeper, and it's happened before. I call back, 1 second. But then I realized the voice wasn't coming from her room. It sounded like it came from the kitchen. At the other end of the hallway, really. I tried to brush it off, thinking maybe her voice echoed or imagined it or something, but something about it just felt wrong. For some context, her house is small. The hallway isn't much of a hallway. It connects to the bathroom and kitchen and living room and a bedroom at the end. So when I stepped out of the bathroom to head back to her room, I froze. In the corner of the living room, near the front door, I saw something. It wasn't human. It was a tall black mass, completely still and featureless, like it was just standing there watching me. My stomach dropped and I couldn't move. It didn't make a sound or even shift. It was just there. After a few seconds, I snapped out of it and bolted to a room. Quietly shut the door, locked it behind me. My girlfriend's still asleep and I don't want to wake her, but I can't stop shaking. I sat on the bed trying to convince myself it was nothing, maybe a shadow in the corner of the living room or my tired brain playing tricks on me. But I can't explain the voice. It sounded exactly like her calling my name from the kitchen, but she's been asleep the whole time. I've had weird experiences in her house before. It's not haunted, but it's definitely creepy. But this is completely different. Can't stop replaying the image of that thing standing there in the corner, completely motionless. I'm not sure what to do now. I'm laying in her bed, quietly freaking out, trying not to wake her. But I really am not sure what to do. I'm not necessarily religious or spiritual at all, but I'll do whatever's necessary that could even maybe help. Does my singing cause paranormal activity? Hi, I'm a beginning indie singer with a lot of unrecorded songs. Want to release them the best quality I can, since all I have is a cheap mic I bought online in an apartment with thin walls. I prefer recording at night while I'm home alone, and as not to have so much going on in the background of my songs. At first everything was going well. I even released a song, and it didn't do so well, but I was happy because I had another one ready to record. I waited till everybody was gone that evening and got to work. Everything was going well until I started seeing things out of the corner of my view. Paid no mind the first time, thinking it was probably the light playing tricks on my tired eyes. I continued trying to sing, and soon dishes started to clink together. Things started to fall around the house, interrupting the recording. I had to call my mom, finish the song with her on call because I got way too spooked. I finally finished the song and released it. That one didn't do so well either, so I got to work and created a third song a few days later and was ready to record. I performed the same routine and the same things started happening. Things out of the corner of my eye and weird sounds and pots and pans clanging against each other. Except this time, my microphone crackled and then popped. Didn't want to record anything afterwards, and I didn't record the song. I was so angry. Angry that I was scared and not being able to enjoy something as simple as singing. Now I'm scared of singing while no one's home, which is kind of sad. I really love to do it. Now that I think about it, this kind of thing's always happened. It's just gotten worse. My question is, has anybody had a similar experience? Does anybody know why this is happening? Sincerely, maybe a soon-to-be famous singer. As a not famous singer whose mic does similar things, can't do much else other than concur. In fact, you guys have heard some of this popping. Alternatively, could be an electronic short. And usually when you blow into a microphone like that, or a condenser mic, it will make a popping sound. Then won't make any noise for a while, till the diaphragm dries out. My brother cried and told me that he made a deal with the devil and slept, but when he woke up didn't remember anything. It was the summer night and I was just chilling when my brother, who was 14, came home from his football training. He told us that he had a headache and went to his room to sleep. About an hour he called us and said that he didn't feel good and needed help because he was about to throw up. His whole body was shaking as if he were freezing. My mom instructed me to call an ambulance because she was very worried about him. I immediately did so. As we waited for the ambulance, my mom went to bring him some water. Suddenly, he started to cry. I asked him why. He replied that he had made a deal with the devil, offering his soul in exchange for a great life for his family. He continued crying. It took approximately 20 minutes for the ambulance to arrive since we lived outside of the city, but by the time the ambulance arrived, he had fallen asleep again. However, when the doctors arrived and woke him up, he appeared surprised and asked why they were there. He claimed to feel completely fine and stated that the last thing he remembered was going to sleep after coming home. The doctors took a blood sample from him to test for any drugs and assured us that they would inform us if anything was wrong. But unfortunately, he never heard from them again, and to this day he doesn't remember anything about that incident, leaving me wondering if he truly made a deal with the devil. I think I talk to spirits at night. I think I talk to spirits when I sleep. The title makes me sound ridiculous, but let me give some explanation. I had a weird experience last night. This wasn't the first time. The first instance was a couple of years ago. After a small party, a female of 23 years of age, was sleeping with my girlfriend, a female of 21. We were in the living room with our friend, a female 22, and her boyfriend. Our friend, we're going to call her C, and I'm going to call her Carla, was awake and we were sleeping. I have weird dreams, but she left that night. She got scared after what she saw. She saw me grab a ball of light while I was still sleeping and brought it back down to me. Then the light supposedly left me, went around the room to her feet. She brings this up every time we get together now, and since then I have a habit of having vivid dreams. I saw 2 mediums this year in March, and they said I was a lighthouse for damaged souls. They both said this. One also said I find dimes from spirits around me. Other things were said, but it's not related to this story. For context, I've always been in haunted houses when I was growing up pretty much my whole life. I don't know if that means anything, but last night I woke up at around 3 a.m. to myself reaching out in the air as if I was sleeping in my back. I looked around and immediately told my girlfriend because I thought if I told her in the morning she wouldn't believe me. I remember the dream I had really clearly. This was before I woke up. My arms were reaching out and I was in a total black abyss. I couldn't see anything and I wasn't really a being either, but I felt a presence there. So I said hello, and whatever this was got excited. See, we didn't communicate with talking. I couldn't even see it. Imagine closing your eyes and seeing a light being shined toward you. It looked like that. But I knew what it was trying to get across. It didn't feel intimidating, it felt sad, but it was happy I could understand what it was there and what it was trying to say. I was talking to it, and it would communicate with a bright flickering light. It was a girl, and it seemed like she hasn't talked to anyone in a long time. I was there for a while just with her, and she seemed happy about it. When I woke up, I wasn't scared, but all I could think of was I hope that she's okay, and I hope she found her way to wherever she was going. After that, I got up, did my business in the washroom, and came back to bed, and there was a dime on the edge. That was where my feet would lay. We don't carry cash, and I picked it up and showed my girlfriend, and at this point she was scared and didn't want to go back to sleep. Find myself thinking about that girl all day today. I just wonder what I'm experiencing, if anybody else has been through it too. I need some insight on what to do if I could do anything to really help. Ghost in the front bedroom. My family have moved into my wife's parents' old home. That's while our own house is being rebuilt. This house we're staying in is only about 40 years old. Not aware of anybody passing away here. For weeks now, I've been having strange experiences in our bedroom, mainly with lights. The room light is regularly being turned on by something or someone, but not anyone human. My clock radio does a random thing sometimes too. The brightness will be adjusted by something or then lightly turn on and off by itself. It can also change color, which sometimes happens. Sometimes this happens several nights in a row, and then won't happen at all for weeks, without any real reason or intervention from us. But The most real encounter I've had was a few weeks ago. I was waking in the night to something tugging on the doorknob from my side of the bed. I sat up and looked around, thinking my 5-year-old son had come, but there was nothing visible at the end or the side of the bed. Lay down again while fully alert and had the covers yanked hard several times. That was too much for me. Got up and stayed awake the rest of the night. My wife doesn't even believe it happened, but I absolutely insist that it did. I was chatting with the neighbor who says that they used to have experiences a few years ago. That's where a clock radio would start making noise when it wasn't even plugged in. Any chance that these are connected? What might we be dealing with, if anything? I have a few stories to share, seeking some advice or guidance. The first time I encountered something unexplainable was around 5 to 7 years old. That was while my parents were away, and I was staying with my aunt, and I saw a photo of an uncle I'd never met. Curious, I asked my aunt about him. She told me that he had passed away. She shared many positive stories about him, and I remembered telling her that I'd have liked to have known him. Later that day, while watching TV at home, my dog was outside and started barking toward me through the window behind me. I turned around and I saw him growling and scratching at the window. And between us, the same uncle from the photo standing behind me with his hands in his pockets, just looking at me. My dog continued to bark at him, but I was frozen, unable to move or speak. I was thinking that somebody had broken into the house. After a few seconds into the house, I just disappeared into thin air, leaving me shocked and scared, wondering what I had just witnessed. I've also experienced things that others have also experienced. For some background, in Mexico, it's a tradition for the close family to gather at the deceased house to pray the rosary for 9 days after their passing. When my maternal grandfather passed away after I buried him, we returned to my grandparents' house. That's where my grandmother still lives. That day after praying, my uncle and I were talking when suddenly, through a window beside us, we both saw my grandfather walking from the street toward the entrance of the house. Quickly, my uncle turned to me. I could see the disbelief in his face, and he asked me, "Did you see what I just saw?" I replied that I had also seen my grandfather walking toward the house. My uncle rushed outside, opening the door to find no one there. The street was completely empty. We were left in shock, unable to believe what we had just witnessed. I've had many experiences like these, where I just see people staring at me, but I have also experienced negative situations. For example, when my brother and I were young, but old enough that my mom would trust us to stay home alone while she went grocery shopping. Often, strange things would happen when my brother and I were alone, especially when we played games. One time we were playing hide and seek. It was my turn to find him. Our house had 2 floors, and the upper floor had a hallway dividing the house. You could either go left or right from the middle of the hallway, but to reach one side, you had to pass through the hallway. It was my turn to seek, and I counted 15. I cheated a bit and looked around while counting from 5 to 15, hoping to spot where he had hid. As I finished counting, I glanced to my right. I saw a silhouette similar to my brother's. A child around 9 or 10 years old running toward my parents' bedroom and hiding behind the bed. I finished counting and quickly ran to that room, only to find no one there. Panicked, I called out his name, saying I didn't want to play anymore, asking where he was. He was on the complete opposite side of the house, and that was the first time I saw the child in the house. Reflecting on it now, it seems like he was playing with my brother and me. At first, I didn't think much of it. But as months passed, more and more strange things happened around the house. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep in my room because I felt the child had taken over the space. My family thought I was imagining things, but it was very real to me. This child would move things in my room and make noises. even knock on the walls and doors, as if somebody was tapping on it. The fear became so intense that I would run out of my room and sleep on the parents' room or my brother's room. I remember waking up in the early hours to go to the bathroom. As I walked half asleep, someone would always blow sharply in my ear, startling me awake, and I would run back to my room in terror. This child appeared in different parts of the house, just for a second or two, running past a doorway or down a hallway. It wasn't until I dreamed of him that things changed. In my dream, I got up as usual to get ready for school. The child came to me smiling. Enraged, I shouted at him, telling him to leave and that I never wanted to see him again. The child cried, ran out through the front door, and after that, I never saw him again. I've experienced paranormal things around my whole house, but many strange things happened in my parents' room. I remember seeing people walking around in there before. Once I came back with a basket of clean laundry to my parents' room and I was completely alone in the house. I remember walking into my parents' room and seeing an old woman, around 70 years old, with white hair sitting on their bed. She was dressed in a black dress and looking sadly out of the window beside the bed. After 2 or 3 seconds, she disappeared, leaving me with the feeling of dread. Not only have I experienced these paranormal events, but they've also occurred to my family, especially on my mother's side. For instance, before my grandfather passed away, my mother's father, my mom had a weird experience. She was asleep when something suddenly woke her up. Upon opening her eyes, she didn't see anybody, but heard a woman's voice whisper into her ear. "Tell your father that he has 10 days to confess." In the Catholic Church, confession is important to the forgiveness of sins, especially before death, as a way to repent and seek the opportunity to enter heaven with God. Startled by the message, my mom woke up and called my grandparents' house. My grandmother assured her that everything was fine and that my grandfather was okay. They had just finished breakfast. However, my mom insisted that he go to the doctor for a checkup, explaining what just happened to my grandmother. Concerned, my grandmother also urged my grandfather to see the doctor. A couple of days later, after some checkups, they discovered he had advanced colon cancer, and he passed away sometime after. This experience of waking up to a warning and then discovering my grandfather's illness has been one of the most puzzling moments for our family. It's a mystery how my mother received this message, alerting her to my grandfather's condition. I don't constantly have paranormal phenomena in my mind. I just go about my normal life. But if I enter a place, I can quickly sense if something is off or if there's a presence watching me. Even when I'm alone or with others, I sometimes catch a glimpse of people walking by for just a second, seeing their silhouette approach or stand behind me before they quickly disappear. After that, they vanish. I can still feel their presence near me. I like to think they're people I know or deceased relatives, like my grandfather, uncles, or my father. I hope it's them, but I'll never be entirely sure. Most of the time, I don't feel their presence as negative. It feels positive, as if they have good intentions. I try to talk to them in both English and Spanish, hoping for a sign or a message. There's no clear way to communicate with them or to confirm if they want to speak or just observe. This is why I'm writing this post. I'm asking if anybody knows how to develop this ability or gift, if that's what it is. I'm not sure what to call it, but if anybody can help me improve or communicate with these entities, I'm willing to try. As a child, these experiences scared me, but now at 26, with a more open mind, I'm not as fearful. I want to experience these situations more often. Be careful what you wish for. My great-grandmother always visited me on my birthday. My great-grandmother always called me her birthday angel. We shared the same birthday, November 11th. She had dementia very badly leading up to her passing, but she always remembered that I was her birthday angel even when she couldn't remember anything else. Every year since she died right around the date of her birthday, I would experience a visit from her. I would always smell her perfume first. She had a very distinct, strong perfume smell. It would consume me, and I'd feel warmth like she was giving me a hug. It felt like when you close your eyes and look up into the sun. It would last for about a minute, 2 minutes. Then she would disappear. I look forward to that moment every year. It doesn't always happen on the exact date, but sometimes a few days before or the night prior. Never had to wait until after my birthday, though. This is the first year I've not had that experience, at least yet. We finally were able to get her ashes from a family member earlier this year and put them to rest. So part of me hopes that this means that she's moved on and resting peacefully. The selfish part of me is hoping that she'll come stay, or at least come say happy birthday one last time. I needed to get this off my chest, and I'm hoping maybe somebody here will understand. It's been 12 years now, but I still miss her. My heart aches this time of year. An orb of light exploded in my living room a year ago, causing me to feel energy fields ever since. It started the afternoon after I got back from a 2-week trip to the Middle East, to Israel, Jordan, and Turkey. I was sitting in our living room in the early afternoon. I was drinking some tea and reading on my phone. That's when I noticed my index finger, middle finger, and thumb on my right hand started feeling like they were tingling and increasing in intensity. It felt totally unusual, but how I could best describe it was like being charged up. I didn't think much of it other than it was odd, but it was distracting, so I kept looking over at my hand. My wife noticed me looking at it and said, "What's wrong with your hand?" "I don't know, it just feels weird and it's tingling," I said. "Let me see." She walked over to where I was sitting down and reached out to touch it, and before she could even reach her hand to mine, both felt an explosive, pulsing orb of energy flash between us. That was without us even yet making contact with each other. It looked to me like a white sphere expanding outwards and exploding between us. Her hand was maybe 12-18 inches away from even touching me when this happened. She jumped back, and out loud we both yelled, "Whoa, what the fuck was that?" My immediate reaction was to try it again. I stood up and walked over to her, where I felt instinctually drawn to hovering my fingers over top of her chest and back several inches above it, as though I was scanning across her like a metal detector. It felt as though there were strings of light connecting my fingers to her, and for part of this experience I could actually visualize them and see them, though it felt more like a type of augmented reality, as I knew they weren't literally visible in the room. I could just see them. Extending out of my fingers, it was like tentacles of spaghetti light, reaching out to her body towards points of contact that felt like areas of increased energy, where the field of area felt denser, with almost a magnetic resistance type of feeling. While some areas would have almost none, and in the clear areas my fingers still tingled a little bit, but would feel like the area was either clear of energy, weight, or had diminished magnetic resistance until I'd get closer to a denser area where the field would increase. That was until I could almost find the densest energetic point within the area. The dense areas felt like energy continents, like where the closer I moved my finger to their relative center, the stronger the pull between the tip of my finger and the cord of energy reaching out towards it was. It was almost like my finger was being tugged toward the fields where the magnetic connection was the strongest, and once I felt the edges of one in these denser spaces, I could move my finger around the area to feel where the energy was the densest and determine where the borders of these energy continents were. My fingers very much felt like antennae of sorts, both broadcasting to her but receiving at the same time. It was kind of like scanning through static on a radio station or hitting an auditory frequency that gets clearer until you tune the station in perfectly where the audio is most clear. If I moved past where it was most in tune, I could immediately feel it. I literally could feel and hear my wife's heartbeat from about 2, maybe 3 feet or more away as an electrical pulse. When I moved anywhere outside that narrow field of space, it would get quiet until I was far enough away that it would be gone. Think of the area as being 6 to 12 inches or so in diameter, roughly. I could hear her heart pulsing in my head in addition to feeling it in my finger. It also sounded a little bit like I could feel a hum in between beats, so I could kind of sound like a lightsaber swinging, like when passing over her heart, then idling between swings when I pointed my fingers away. I tried to see if I could feel the energy with my other hand and pulling on where I perceived the cord of light to be, but couldn't feel it with my left hand even though I could visualize it still via the scanning of my right hand I was doing. I still tried to pull on the energy with my left hand, though knowing that maybe it was still doing something, as even if I couldn't feel the field with my left hand, I could still visualize it. This went on for about 10 or 15 minutes, with both of us kind of remarking and kind of freaking out while I'm doing it. What is this? What's going on? How is this possible? That comprised of most of what was said while I was scanning her. Other than that, we were mostly speechless, just taking the experience in. My wife could feel me doing all this the entire time. Made me stop after 10 to 15 minutes, and she said she felt exhausted by it. She said it feels uncomfortable and she feels a little bit violated when I do it. Not the greatest first review of my energy abilities. After stopping, it slowly fizzled out though, and I could feel residuals of the sensation of both the rest of the day and you could say intermittent spurts afterwards. Afterwards, we went on about her day, not even talking about it till late that evening. It's weird when I think about it because it was the craziest thing that we both ever experienced, but somehow we were both at a loss for words. It was like stepping into some parallel reality that was too much for us to process at that moment. However, later that night I awoke and couldn't get back to sleep. Found myself again with an irresistible urge to get up and write the experience down while it was fresh. Tried to talk myself out of it, thinking I'd still remember it in the morning, but my mind kept saying, no, write it down now. It was around 3 a.m., and as soon as I finished writing the experience down, our master bedroom bathroom light slowly pulsed on to full blast, then abruptly turned back off. I looked at the clock, and it was 3:33 a.m., if the story couldn't get any weirder. Anyway, about 7 to 10 days went by where I thought about it daily. Didn't even consider typing it again, as I sort of just expected it was some freak spontaneous moment. However, couldn't get it off my mind, and eventually decided to share the story with a family member whose Reiki experience, thinking maybe she was gonna have some kind of useful information. She was the first one to suggest that I should try again. Told me to go to experiment with one of my wife's many crystals, who owns an online crystal boutique, by the way. My aunt said that quartz is very powerful in Reiki sessions, so later that evening I found the biggest piece of quartz I could find on her shelves, walked over to it, reached out my hand, and immediately once my hand was about 6 to 12 inches away, I could feel this energy field again. It freaked me out a little. Pulled my hand back like I just touched a hot burner or something. I repeated this again for about another 5 minutes until my entire arm felt like it was pulsating with this energy all the way up to my shoulder. In the few weeks that followed, I found that this tingling would activate at random. I could feel it coming on, and once it was, stimulated, I could feel the field of objects. However, after several months now of experimenting and working with it on my own, I've developed it to where I can activate it almost instantly at will. No other time has been as intense with sound and visuals as that initial Big Bang moment, but whatever got activated in me has most definitely stayed on. It's like stepping into a weird dream. Keep thinking I'm going to wake up any day and the ability will be gone, but it hasn't. Quite to the contrary. For the initial months after I was obsessed with trying to feel the field of energy, now if anything it has become pretty much so normal to me like an extra sentence. When I want to do it now, I simply just have to think for a few seconds about connecting with the object and agree in my head to connect, and within a few seconds I sort of tune in and lock onto it. It doesn't come on spontaneously as much anymore now that I can turn it on, but every now and again it will. I've been doing various experiments, testing different objects, usually crystals because they're usually more intense, but I've tried everyday objects too, with most having some sort of feeling to their field. My pets, and definitely feel like I can feel injuries or organs or areas of inflammation in particular, but as well as my wife and several others who I've shared the story with. All of them felt something, with most describing it like a low-level electrical current, sometimes with a magnetic field to it, like a 9-volt battery on your tongue, but sometimes with a magnetic force to it too. My wife calls it sparkly fingers. I told my very skeptical sister about this for weeks before, and she would let me try it on her hand, and within a couple of minutes, she freaked out when I zapped her and immediately said to me, "Who are you?" If things couldn't get more unusual, unrelated to the investigation of this, I was at a local cemetery one time since, and immediately it spontaneously activated when I got on the property. Caught me off guard. Wasn't even thinking about it or anticipating it, if not for being for that purpose. However, for the next hour I was there, I could feel the energy signature of every single grave I scanned over. Each one a unique intensity, just like the unique signatures of crystals. That was the first time I realized I can use this sense from as far as 6 to 10 feet away. Never would have guessed it had more of a range, and since I've been able to target my wife where she can feel me scanning her from across the room from about 10 feet away. Since this happened, I've been trying to learn as much as I can about all related modalities or traditions that could shed some light on this phenomenon. I didn't already have a model for this before it happened to me, so it's been a lot to catch up on. Didn't really have any vocabulary for it. I wasn't already in Reiki and energy work or related concepts. Even though my wife does have a crystal store, I really wasn't into crystals myself beyond an aesthetic appreciation. I always very dismissive or metaphysical or New Age claims about them, for example. I don't have ambitions of being a healer or anything of the sorts. I don't think I'd even want that responsibility. I have no gift attached to this, and it's quite literally turned my entire worldview upside down. If anything, it's been incredibly distracting, taking my focus away from many things that now feel very trivial compared to getting to the bottom of this. Ultimately, I would love if I could find a way to measure it somehow beyond my own sense of it, but also learn or understand if there's any purpose to beyond knowing that I can simply feel the field of things. How does it feel for me? Well, when I connect with something, I can basically feel how far out I feel the field and where its densest point is. I can almost push on the edge of that densest energy point like I'm pushing against a pillowy magnetic field. Can back my hand off just slightly and rest my hand on this field sometimes. Sometimes I also feel the rate and speed of the vibration like a 9-volt battery to tongue sensation, but at different speeds and intensities. Washing hands will diminish it, but only as long as hands are wet. So, also worth noting that I seem sensitive to electronics now a little too. Sometimes using my phone makes my hand tingle while scrolling, and I generally feel like the battery or electrical component of the device are in a similar way finding energy buildups in a person. Interesting. Sweet dreams.